All right. Welcome to another edition of Shabbat Lounge. As always, I appreciate you taking a minute to listen to the podcast, and also encourage you to give it a like, comment, share this with someone that might find it beneficial. And I just thank you for spending some time with me today. And today I'm just flying solo, and just kind of decided to do something about Thanksgiving kind of on my own, and wanted to get that out pretty quick. So, as you can see, this is my website. If you go to sabbathlounge.com, it will go right to this. I started off with it's yahushua.com. And either site will get you to Facebook, podcast, Twitter, voicemail, YouTube, and contact information. Also, appreciate any questions or comments from anything that we do. Also, especially the Hebrew Hammer appreciates anything. If you're not sure what that refers to, if you refer back to an earlier podcast, I believe it's called Introducing Jake Hebrew Hammer, you will find an interesting, valid, complex argument that he makes there, and he's looking for people to say something about it. So I encourage you to go take a look at it, see what you think. And last week we were honored with Michael from Michael Oman from across the pond to share with us some thoughts about the wedding language. And if you haven't checked him out, you've got to do that. And, he is a very sharp guy and has put some interesting things together for sure. So hopefully this is going to work okay. I'm going to switch between browsers. And so today I pulled up this old post and I started writing this as Thanksgiving Pagan. And I'm going to probably put these two things together. And so last year I did a post and I found this article about, this guy wrote a book in 1652 called The Hope of Israel. And he talked about how the lost tribes in America, the pilgrims are connected to the lost tribes. And so I kind of started there. And then, so I started going, well, pilgrims. Well, who is William Bradford? And so when I pulled up William Bradford, and the first thing I started finding is I was like, whoa, there's a William Bradford that's a Freemason. I was like, oh, danger, ding, ding, ding. And he was a governor and of Massachusetts. And so I went and looked him up a little bit, and I believe this is the William Bradford that comes over on the Mayflower. This is his son, and he's a little bit later. And so I kind of have a theory that I'm developing, and so I'll explain that as I go. So that was interesting. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I also start looking up this, and I find this article, and I will post all of these links as well. And this was from Lee Gamble, Charles Green, The Sabbath in the British Isles. And they talk about how that the Sabbath was practiced as a seventh-day Sabbath for a long time until like the 1300s in Britain. And he cites different people that he quotes here, and which I thought was kind of interesting, but talked about how even Socrates wrote about many church fathers testified that Sunday had not displaced the Sabbath as late, at least as Socrates, the church historian who wrote about the close 5th century, that with the exception of Rome and Alexandria, all churches throughout the whole world celebrate the sacred mysteries on the Sabbath day. Socrates, History of the Church, 289, London, 1880. And that is not the same Socrates that you might be thinking of, but it was another historian. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting that you have... There's definitely seems to be proof that practicing the seventh-day Sabbath definitely was something that happened in the British Isles, for sure. So that gives me back to William Bradford. And so if you look up, why did the Pilgrims leave Holland? Because of Sabbath. Well, you'll find all kinds of articles. Mayflowerhistory.com. They leave Holland because they strictly observed the Sabbath and not performing any labor on Sunday. So that was interesting. That so there's some interesting questions that you start to see develop here. And you also see some controversy. So some people say it was, so this one right here, the Pilgrims keep the seventh day, history of the 12. And so this article says that the Uniformity Act required everyone to go to church on Sunday, and that's why they leave Holland. And this is kind of where I tend to fall. Is I think this is probably true, and they joined the Mennonite Church in Holland and had protection. So, but it is interesting, and I think it gets so confused because the topic itself is confusing, because it does the Sabbath was meant to be the seventh day, and at some point people, I think because it was the path of least resistance, they began to combine it on Sunday, and then they try to attribute the real qualities of a seventh day Sabbath to Sunday, and call it the Lord's Day. And so that there is something that happens. And so anyway, I'm going to stop right here and tell you, go check it out. I'm giving you all the links, and give me some feedback. Am I crazy? Let me know. But this is kind of where my research leads me. And I also have to say, is it not amazing that we live in a day and time when we can just instantly type in these things and find so many articles that your head explodes? And in this case, I found a lot of conflicting information, and it might take more research than what I had today. And then I found this one. This is a article about. It's from the University of Kentucky about William Bradford. It's an assignment that someone had here, and I kind of like this assignment. And what I did is I just did Control F, and I found all the time the word Hebrew was listed. And so there is this thing that you see that William Bradford was trying to learn Hebrew, and he brought that over. And so there's a lot of evidence that they were learning Hebrew, that they were interested in going back to the real roots, to the real faith, and they wanted to get away from denominationalism that was already starting to creep in. So you have that. They forbid Christmas. And so there's some interesting things that they do in this Puritan colony, and I don't believe that William Bradford was a Freemason, but I do believe that his son was, and that's why. So anyway, so I'm going to give you once again. I'm going to give you that link. But when I Googled this, I found this young girl, and she claims to be his great great granddaughter or something to a Bradford, and she writes this article about going back to his grave, and look at what we have here, which I find interesting. And then I also find interesting that you've got Hebrew right here. So, and I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and so you can see her. And Rachel is the one that went and investigated this, and was her great great grandpa William Bradford. And so um, anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting that here she is in front of this. I was going to see if I could get closer, but I can't. And so anytime you see that, you kind of go, what's happening? And it does and should, create some doubt in your mind about what's happening here. But if you think about it, there is no evidence that says William Bradford Sr., who came over on the Mayflower, was a Freemason. But if his son was the one that paid for this marker. And yeah, this is what he decided to put up as an obelisk. So that's interesting, and that does fit in line with the Freemasons. And so anyway, I just challenge you as you research this to see if you see what you come up with. And then, but I want to go back. You can see that old William Bradford. He was quite the looker, wasn't he? Interesting. I guess just times have changed a lot. So, but definitely interesting look, especially with the collar, and that's just so weird. But anyway, I'm glad I didn't live in that time. So here we have her. And then if you go Google, this is the biography.com, you find William Bradford, governor, 1590 to 1657. So, and there's no mention in here about him being a Freemason. And it says he is a leading figure. And so this is kind of interesting. William Bradford was believed to have been born in Austerfield, Yorkshire, England, in March of 1590, with records indicating his baptism being around this time. His parents died early in his childhood, leaving Bradford in care of various relatives. Attending a religious service in Scrooby before his teen years, the youngster joined the Separatist denomination, a more radical branch of the Puritanism that believed in removing itself from the Church of England, which is a good thing. He and other congregants eventually fled to the Netherlands to escape persecution. Through their adopted land, they still faced attacks due to the country's affiliation with England's King James I. So, then you go on down, it talks about the Mayflower and the Mayflower journey, and talks about him being a governor. And he, as you all know, that the Thanksgiving story happens, and he was 30 years, and he does help save this colony. And William Bradford has the famous quote, "If you don't work, you don't eat." And so this was a colony made up of aristocrats who were used to having people who do not have to do that work. And what happened is they came over to this new world, and everybody died, and especially their servants, because they had to work so hard. And then these people were left who didn't know how to do anything, and their hands were soft, and they didn't have hard, calloused hands. And they just expected other people to do stuff for them, and that's why Bradford's like, "Hey, look, there's not anybody that's going to do this for you. So if you want a warm fire, you better get out and swing an axe, and you can have warm fire too." So that's kind of a little bit about Bradford. He does save the day, and that's why you see him in a statue, or I like to call it an idol, which is kind of interesting. So anyway, there's sites of bibliography there as well. And then when you look up the church and religion, this is a copy of the Pilgrim's Psalm book. By the way, if you're listening to this on a podcast, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and look at the YouTube on this, because you'll see there's visual references here, and so you don't get that on the podcast, but you may be driving and not have that option. But later, definitely go check it out. But anyway, church and religion. This is from mayflowerhistory.com/religion. So this one just goes on about some of the tenets in the church hierarchy that they had. The church building was, I like this right here. It was kept intentionally drab and plain, with no religious depictions, crosses, windows, fancy architecture, or icons to avoid the sin of idolatry. At Plymouth, the Pilgrim's Church was the bottom floor of the town's fort. The top floor had 6 cannons, which I like that. So anyway, so it was a pretty plain Jane. And then so according to this article, the Pilgrims began their church on Sunday. So, and some of these things do come out of the articles and the journals that they wrote. They did believe in infant baptism. I'm not saying that these guys had it all figured out, but I do think it's interesting that here in America, we have this group of people who came over for religious freedom. They don't practice Christmas, and they keep a 7th-day Sabbath, which is all interesting. So here's an article about observing the Sabbath. And so once again, check out the links, see what these people say. And then I went on and I found this article. This from cogwriter.com, Early Sabbath Keepings of America. And so this article basically states, and so my theory is that William Bradford was originally a 7th-day Sabbath keeper. Somewhere along the line, either his son, it does look like his son becomes a Freemason, and I believe that that's probably the point where this changed to Sunday, was somewhere in there. But from the there's journal articles. That's what this article accounts, is saying that you can go find journal articles where they wrote down that they're doing a Sunday Sabbath. Because right here it's from the Journal of the English Plantation at Plymouth, with Plimoth, which, it's for real because it's spelled funny, and that's how they would have spelled it. So, but the next morning, being Thursday, the 21st of December, Saturday, the 23rd, so many of us as could went on shore, felled and carried timber to provide themselves stuff for building. Sunday, the 24th, our people on shore heard a cry of some savages, they thought. When I was teaching school, I always told kids that they called them the naked savages, which I do believe that is true. Anyway, which caused an alarm and to stand on the guard expecting an assault, but all was quiet. Monday, the 25th, they went ashore. So anyway, talks about how right here, Friday and Saturday, we fitted ourselves for our labor. But I do go, labor is not spelled correctly there. They would have had a U in that. But anyway, maybe they just didn't translate it quite right. I don't know, or changed it. So, but that's where some of the people start making the arguments that yes, indeed, they did keep a Sunday Sabbath. Then I found this site is graceandknowledge.faithweb.com, Pilgrims, the Pilgrim Sabbath. And so somebody's answering the question about exactly what we're talking about. And then somewhere down here, they talk about journal entries. So it says 2 of the entries in this journal indicate that it was the custom of the Pilgrims to rest and meet for worship on Sunday. In early December of 1620, the Mayflower was off the coast of what is now Massachusetts, as the Pilgrims looked for a good location for a settlement. According to the journal, 10th of December, on Sabbath day, we, with 2 E's, rested. And on Monday, we sounded the harbor with a U, and we found it very good. Harbor for our shipping. Saturday, and then for January 1621, they said Saturday 20th, we made up a shed for our common goods. Sunday, the 21st, we kept our meeting on land. So, anyway, that's some other evidence going on. Then I found this article called the 12tribehistory.com, Pilgrims Kept the Seventh Day Sabbath. And from an article, okay, so then I found, there's a connection with the Anabaptist and the Mennonites, which is kind of interesting. So, I remember learning about Anabaptist in a world history class, and it just seemed weird and strange at the time to me. And so I should have paid attention a little bit more, apparently. And but anyway, according to this was Don A. Sanford, a chosen people, the history of the Seventh-day Baptist, Broadman Press, Nashville, Tennessee, 1992. He wrote this article about how Baptist heritage is closely related to some people that did keep Seventh-day Sabbath. So, which is kind of interesting. And then, in fact, the Scrooby congregation, I believe we saw that before, stated that the Seventh-day Baptist Church in America, among the Scrooby congregation, so anyway, so there's a link to Seventh-day Baptist. So all you good Baptists out there, or people with a Baptist background, you might find that interesting. It says the Pilgrims came from 3 churches in Scrooby, Gainsborough, and Southwark. They fled to Holland, where many attended with the Mennonites. The Mennonites were the descendants of the Waterlissons, who fled also to Holland. The Mennonites were Seventh-day Sabbath keepers. Members of the Scrooby congregation were laterally founded the Seventh-day Baptist Church, 1705. There you go. So next, you have this one, Herbert W. Armstrong, and he writes about the Pilgrim Sabbath case of mistaken identity, and he argues the case that many people have thought that they kept the true, um, and and so he basically says there is very much great confusion about the Sunday Sabbath, and he does say apparently it does seem to get changed to Sunday, and according to journal writing. So it does seem like there's a lot of journal writings, but I do believe at some point many of these Puritans were Seventh Day Sabbath keepers, and something happened, and they became a Sunday keeper, and that's kind of where our modern blue laws came from, and the way we still view Sunday today in America was largely because of that, and that kind of makes sense. So then I started finding this old book, and this book is let's see, it is Neely, History of the Puritans, Volume 2, and page 285, 129, 43, 197, and more. If you go to Google, and you can find this, basically, I believe it's an open source book because it is so old, and you can type in this little search box Sunday, and it will pull up all these things about talking about Sunday being the first day of the week. So anyway, it's definitely interesting to go check those things out. And then I found this one. This is just on good old Wikipedia. Puritan Sabbatarianism, Reformed Sabbatarianism, or Sabbatarianism. Unlike the Seventh-day Sabbatarians, Puritan Sabbatarians practiced a first-day Sabbatarianism. So anyway, then you got John Calvin here, and yeah, John Calvin. And then I also found this article, and which was, well, that's the same girl. So sorry, I forgot that was in there twice. And so I believe that's it. So I just wanted to come back to once again, I challenge you to go research this, see if it's true. See what your conclusion is about William Bradford and the Puritans and the Pilgrims. And in our house, we have decided that there are some things that kind of make you think this is a pagan tradition, but there's not a whole lot of that. It's mostly most of the record of Thanksgiving points you to they were people who nearly died, who gathered up, partnered with the natives, share a meal together, which they made a covenant. So, for you and I who know a little bit about Torah, we understand that eating a meal with someone is making a covenant. And so they made a covenant with these Indians, and it was a peace covenant, and they said, hey, we're going to try to get along here, and let's stop killing each other. And so they have this feast, they have this meal, and they are thanking God, thanking Yahuwah for the feast. And so I think that you find a lot more support that it is a non-pagan tradition, but I know people out there feel like it is. So I'm open to that. If you can prove it to me beyond a shadow of a doubt with sources, books, page numbers, website entries, bring it on. Show it to me. Do it. Put it in the links. So anyway, I appreciate you taking a listen. And if you do celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you have an amazing Thanksgiving with friends and family and food. And I hope your boss gives you at least one day off so that you can enjoy those things. And once again, I thank you for listening to Shabbat Lounge. And always, I ask if you would give it a like, comment, subscribe, check out the WordPress blog, check out the YouTube feed. It's in lots of places. There's a social media account on the Twitters and on the Facebooks. And so anyway, check out those things, and I definitely appreciate you taking a listen. And once again, thank you for listening to Shabbat Lounge.